Remember when we used to fly in the air on airplanes? I read an article yesterday that said air travel is down 65% from this time last year. If this were January 2020, most of us would be returning from our travel plans for the winter holiday. Last year at this time, I was only a few days back from a flight to California where I visited my grandparents. This year, I spent the holidays like millions across our country. On Zoom. Oh, the things we take for granted. I remember the first time I flew on an airplane. I was 4 years old, and I spent most of my time looking out of the window in awe of the view, blabbering to anyone within earshot about my plans with my cousins once we arrived in Denver. However, I was abruptly interrupted by the flight attendant's in-flight safety spiel. And when she stated that all passengers must put their own masks on first, before helping others in case of an emergency, I was stunned. I immediately scanned my mother's face, expecting to see her eyes rolling. But to my surprise, my mother and caregiver was nodding. Immediately, I thought, do you not love me? What kind of person would put their own mask on before saving the life of their adorable daughter? Turns out, this is actually standard practice on an airplane. But in terms of the real world, this ideology has sown deep political divides, distrust of centralized authority, and has led us to forget the part where we help others after putting our own masks on first. And so much of our country has disregarded the first step altogether. Although there are a variety of factors influencing those who have decided not to mask up, given our country's history, there is a philosophy, a fundamental belief, that is dictating the behavior of anti-maskers: rampant individualism. As essayist and critic Megan O'Rourke wrote in The Atlantic in March, flattening the curve of COVID-19 will require a radical shift in American thinking from an individual first to a communitarian ethos. However, as we have recently seen spikes in cases across the country, and a nation that hosted insights repeatedly ranks as the most individualistic country in the world, the National Panel Study of COVID-19 found that the core principle of individualism is leading to significant health consequences. Our intoxication with individualism has hurt our nation, and the need for a collectivist mindset has never been more clear. So today, let's come together and discuss the problems associated with rampant individualism. Second, we'll stand united. Actually, you can keep sitting, but you know what I mean. And examine the causes of rampant individualism, before finally coming up with some solutions that will give us the strength to take on what appears to be a difficult future together. If you're like me, the faster 2020 ended, the better. That year couldn't have gotten any worse, could it? But now that we're reigning in the new year in 2021, we need to include some collectivist resolutions in addition to our own personal ones. The individual above all philosophy that so many people have adopted and seemingly fortified as criticism of individualism has ramped up and created a culture that is not only skeptical of sensible mandates, but one that turns its back on the physical vulnerability of others with little remorse. Demonstrators across the country are gathering for anti-mask rallies, holding signs that claim "My body, my choice," freedom first, and don't suffocate our rights. In an article by Tara McKelvey of the BBC, Neil Melton, a construction project manager from Kansas, told McKelvey that he believes that mask mandates are a government overreach and that people in power want to see what others will submit to. Not only do some people feel as though a mask mandate is intrusive because they have to wear a mask when they don't want to, but they also feel as though they are being attacked by people whose only objective is to exert power over them. In June, researchers at the University of Arizona began tracking mask use and social distancing behaviors and found that 64% of Americans who do not wear masks claim that it is because they believe it's their right as an American. Also in June, Junjin Lee and Ting Zhu of UVA and Bo Bayan of the University of British Columbia went county by county to correlate individualism to social distancing compliance. Even after controlling for variables like political ideology, social capital, and population density. The researchers found that higher local levels of individualism reduced compliance with state lockdown orders by 41%. To be clear, many of our world's most significant contributions are tied to a spirit of individualism. Some of the greatest minds that this country has produced have done their best work solo. But many of the issues that are providing so much conflict today can be attributed to rampant individualism. Individualism unhinged. So let us understand our nation's history, which has fed us this distorted idea of individual rights and the figures that enforce these notions today. The causes of rampant individualism involve beliefs about rights and empowerment of those beliefs by social media and powerful individuals. One of the most influential people on everyday American life was actually someone who was not an American. It was an advocate for the scientific revolution of the late 1600s, a man by the name of John Locke. Locke believed that a government's duty was to protect the individual rights of citizens, which he described as life, liberty, and property. According to Locke, the opportunity to own property was a right that was bestowed by God. In a sense, it's not unthinkable that people might make these connections on their own. However, when they have the support of others on social media, creating an echo chamber, along with persons in positions of power supporting them, rampant individualism can be difficult to dissuade and debilitating to attempts at positive collectivism. According to Ben Decker in the New York Times in October, despite the growing evidence that masks can help prevent the spread of the virus, the number of people that have joined anti-mask Facebook groups have grown to more than 43,000 users since the beginning of August. Support for rampant individualism can also come from powerful people, usually politicians and media personalities. You've probably heard the following lines from British poet John Donne. No man is an island entire of itself, every man is a piece of the continent. The connections that Donne's lines have to this speech are obvious, but what is even more significant is the context in which Donne wrote them. In 1623, Donne was hospitalized with a near-fatal case of spotted fever. Although his daughter was engaged to be married when he got sick, Donne told her to go forth with the wedding. Lying in his hospital bed alone, Donne listened to church bells ringing to mark his daughter's marriage, but also to mark the deaths of those dying from the pandemic. There are some tangible things we can do to combat rampant individualism, but more importantly, it requires a radical shift in our collective mindset. Ironically, an obvious solution to the dangerous effects of rampant individualism is to embrace isolation, just like Donne did. We should avoid meeting others in public and encourage others to do the same. As Elena Levine, a rheumatologist with New York Presbyterian, succinctly put it, reduce your touch points. Another obvious measure that we can take is to wear a mask in public and to convince others who aren't to wear one as well. Finally, we must embrace a collective mindset, and we must remind those who are reluctant to do so that we are not abandoning our personal freedoms. Rather, we are reorienting the prioritization of our opinions and understanding that freedom has its limits. We are not trying to squelch individualism entirely. We are merely cautioning against rampant individualism that harms the collective. As Megan O'Rourke of The Atlantic eloquently states, the nation that believes in individuals more than it values community risks its own survival. If too many of us continue to subscribe to a misconstructed idea of individualism, this plane of a country will crash. My family and I decided that we were going to spend Christmas on our living room couch. Of course, it was not ideal and not what I wanted to be doing, but I realized that it's what I had to do to protect myself and others. At the beginning of the pandemic, a popular statement in response to the frustrations that people were feeling was one of my favorite High School Musical quotes. We're all in this together. Like me, you're probably frustrated right now, but we can take solace in those words. As we move through the rest of 2021 and obstacles get in our way, it is important to remember that yes, we can overcome them together.